In D&D, resting is usually treated as an oversight. You lie down, you spend 8 in-game hours, and you get all your health, spells, and abilities back. All the DM needs to say is, 8 hours have passed, and voila, you've had your long rest. But an often overlooked mechanic is short rests. Needing only 1 hour in-game, you heal a little and get some spells and abilities back, based on your class. During a short rest, players have the option to burn hit dice, something determined by their class and level. They roll their hit dice to heal and add their con modifier. In addition, they also get to regain or use certain abilities, like Dragonborns getting their breath weapon back, or the Bard being able to use their Song of Rest. All the DM needs to say is 1 hour has passed, the players roll, hit dice, or use abilities, and voila, that's your short rest. Mechanically speaking, they feel very similar, if nothing happens during the rest. Ironically, a short rest can feel longer because it takes time for everyone to roll hit dice and use abilities. So because a long rest gives more than a short rests are often overlooked. Why would you do a short rest if you could take a long rest? Because of this, short rests and hit dice are barely used. However, that is not the only way to run resting. There are 2 variant resting rules in the Dungeon Master's Guides, page 267. Epic Heroism and Gritty Realism. In Epic Heroism, a short rest takes 5 in-game minutes, and a long rest takes 1 hour. This is used for more actively combat-focused games, where combat is more routine. Personally, I haven't played in this style, and it's not what I'll be focusing on in this video. In Gritty Realism, however, a short rest is 8 hours, and a long rest takes a whole week. The book doesn't go into too much detail on how you spend a whole week basically sleeping, and it doesn't explain what causes the rest to be interrupted, at least not clearly. But this rule set makes the game good for more intrigue and is great for players who want to figure out ways around combat instead of rushing into it. Many traits are short rest specific, like Arcane Recovery or Song of Rest. Some classes are designed to work better in a Gritty Realism setting. Warlock specifically comes to mind. So here's my guide on how to run Gritty Realism. First, let's answer a couple of questions. How does the rest get interrupted? In the PHB 186, it reads, if the rest is interrupted by a period of strenuous activity, at least 1 hour of walking, fighting, casting spells, or similar adventuring activities, the characters must begin the rest again to gain any benefits from it. This is what the rules say for the normal rest system, and it could work here, but an hour is long and normal combat doesn't last more than a minute, so you're never going to be fighting for 1 hour. Even if the strenuous activity is cumulative over the week-long long rest, it still feels like that's too long for the players to be discouraged from fighting. What I do is I say the players can do anything as long as it's not fighting or traveling. The players are given 1 round of combat to end it or run. If it goes to the second round of combat, the resting stops. As for traveling, players must stay where they are, either in town or base or wherever they are. I'd let them go to nearby towns if they have or if they purchase a ride there and if it's a peaceful travel. My games have a heavy focus on travel and exploration, so they can't go exploring the mountains or woods while resting. Note how I don't punish my players for spellcasting or using abilities. That allows them to still do things during the long rest. Speaking of, the week players have while resting is actually a great time for you, the DM, to introduce new plot threads, characters, and quests. Often, if not always, my players would finish a long quest, come back to their main base, start a long rest, and they would look for their next job. Sometimes players might try to do a job that seems less physically demanding, more focused on sneaking around or detective work. You can always surprise them with a combat and try to interrupt the resting, but don't make it hard. Just make it difficult enough where they can't win in 1 round. This gives them the choice. Okay, do we run or do we try to sway this? Be careful with that last idea. You don't want healing to be difficult. If your players are determined enough, they will take a long rest, even if it takes 2 weeks. There are many downtime activities in the DM guide, and I suggest you look at them. For example, blacksmithing or business running. I made a whole blacksmithing system for this downtime, but this is your game, so if it feels right to you, you can say 1 week passes, and that's the whole long rest. A week is still very long, and if you don't have players who are interested in any downtime, but still want a more gritty, difficult playstyle, we can change the rules. Here's an idea. Keep the resting times the same, but restrict where the players can take a long rest. Players must take a long rest where it is comfortable and safe. Use your discretion, but my rules are they must have a bed, a roof, and a locked door. If the players don't have these 3 things, they can't take a long rest, instead can only make short rests. This has the same effect as playing with Gritty Realism, but it doesn't require the extra work to fill in that week-long long rest. I think there's a comma in there. Also, if you really wanted to spice up your difficulty, you could make both long and short rests 8 hours, but remember, bed, roof, locked door. Another method, this one I didn't run, but a friend of mine did, players aren't allowed to take long rests at all, but in between sessions is considered a long rest. This way, from what I remember, we just never really took rests at all, because we got all of our spells abilities back by the next session. It is not really in the same vein as Gritty Realism, and it can kind of ruin the immersion since you could be in the middle of something and just suddenly have all your spells and health back if that's where the last session ended. But it works to keep the game going without the players constantly wanting to restock on options. Also, I made and played with these rules without knowing about coffee locks, so I just ruled that out. Whether you want to keep the action going or have a slower, more methodical campaign, changing the resting rules is a great way to do that. It forces players to think differently about their resources and how to use them. So I would absolutely recommend different ways of running resting. If you have any of your own house rules for resting or for downtime activities, I'd love to hear them. Like and subscribe. Bye-bye.